it's a corner of internet.
Absolutely,
Right?
yeah.
Right. So I'll tell you a little bit about. Okay, so I think I mentioned that I've been in DevOps space for a long time, and then because of that,
Right.
so so DevOps is pretty interesting, right? Like now it has kind of become a job title, but initially it started as a philosophy of like engineers or developers doing their own operations, right?
Hmm.
So it's kind of like it was a front runner in full stack mindset to a certain extent, right? Where like because it's the emergence of in the web 2 world, right? Like the SaaS ecosystem took over, and then we eventually had cloud companies like AWS and GCP and whatnot, right? So now anybody can rent a server just through an API, right? Like effectively. So a lot of it is just an API integration that we're trying to do, and that just started like a lot of cloud world, and DevOps is primarily philosophy from that world, right? Now, so as I think in 2010s, a lot of cloud patterns got matured, right? A lot of companies start seeing scale and have start facing scale related problems, and then CNCF got made last decade, where larger companies were pooling the technologies that they were making, right? So a lot of technologies around, let's say, Kubernetes or Prometheus and whatnot, like I'm sorry for dropping words, have been built in these companies and pooled together as an open source group, right? Like it's quite similar to how we had an Apache Foundation back in 19s, right? And lot Linux Foundation and the Apache Foundation and how they incubate projects, right? Something like that, right? So a lot of cloud technology started getting incubated over there, right? Now in that space, like typically there is so there are, I think the two important part of DevOps world is like the CI/CD infrastructure, which is more about how can we ship quickly, often with speed and with reliability, right? It focuses
Right.
on that problem. And then it's about observability and reliability. It's about, what is running, is it running or not running, or is it running fine, or wait, how do we know, right? It's the question around that, right? So it comes from this mindset of automation, right? Like you want to have control over the system you made, but
Hmm.
how do you have control without a dashboard, right? So it's like a very basic I think everybody will relate, right? Like even if in business or any side, right, you have to look at some data to make sense of what is going on, right? So
Hmm.
observability is that for software, right?
Hmm.
So yeah, so I think like after Gojek, I got some time. I was exploring what to do more in cloud space. Observability is something I've been involved for a really long time, and somewhere on Twitter, I found an opportunity that the work was just getting started. That's why I was just there.
Right.
I wrote, I
Right.
contributed to some snippets of the paper. Yeah, that. But that's the space that I really enjoy, because at
Great.
Gojek, right, we got to see a scale a lot, right,
Hmm.
and lot of that work, like we were doing several million transactions every day, and like for a good period of time, our whole company was focused on profiling the stack because scale was increasing every few weeks, right? So that's where my interest into observability came, right?
Right.
And I ended up writing that.
Okay. Awesome. Like, quite a fellow nerd you are, and that is good to know. And I love how, you've basically found a way to go back to what you really like doing and what brings you joy time and again. I think that is something a lot of people forget on their journey, which kind of takes me to my next question. That,
I
you've
think that's the
mentioned.
point.
Yeah, yeah, it is. It is the point. And people forget that, right? I think in the
Yeah.
daily humdrum of things, people just tend to forget that. You've mentioned, you've experienced, obviously, like any entrepreneur, I think who's been around for a while, everybody experiences failure and success, right? Obviously, the scale is different for everybody, and that is absolutely okay. But what lessons did you say learn from your failures as well as your successes? And how has that kind of shaped your personality over the years as an entrepreneur?
I think like lot of learnings are quite latent, right? Like a lot of
Hmm.
time has happened. It's very difficult to pinpoint what exactly learned from that, right? But
Right.
because every time I look back, I'm thinking something differently about it, right? Like as
Right.
time is
Yes.
going by,
That
you
happens.
think,
Yeah.
right?
The way you're
The mem
perceiving it, the way you're
Yeah, yeah,
perceiving the future, the past as well changes, right? Because
yeah,
of the experience that you've had in the present, or whatever experiences are
yeah.
shaping your personality, that kind of changes your perspective on what has happened as well.
Exactly, because the observer has changed, right?
Yeah,
So,
exactly. The observer has changed.
right, the observability joke. This was, but yeah,
Right. So, but if
uh,
you had to absolutely pinpoint one or two lessons, like from your failures as well
hmm,
as successes for fellow entrepreneurs, what would those be?
hmm. So I think like over time, I started. I think like I have so a philosophy of startups have been emerging for me, right? Like as in like how I perceive management in startups, right? Like a management strategy, whatever you want to call it, right? There's no good word for these things, anyways.
Hmm. Right.
Right? So I think there's some philosophy of mine have been emerging for me, right? So I typically call it as a one true model, right?
Right.
Uh, so I believe like a lot of times, I think this a lot of people who are doing startups have action bias,
Hmm.
right? They are very trigger happy, they are very active, and they want to do things quickly and want to see results very quickly, right?
Right.
Uh,
Yeah.
but I am much more of a minimalist on the other way
Okay.
around, right? Right? Because I try to counter that because sometimes you start a chain reaction, right? Like you start some activity, it becomes a chain reaction, and then some few weeks steps down the line, you're wondering why I'm doing it. It happens
Right.
all. It happens all the time, right? So
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
just call it like a company needs to have a one true model, right? Basically,
Hmm.
it's a model is nothing but a construct of words through which I can explain every activity that we are doing, right? Like whatever
Hmm.
has to be through the one true model, right?
Right.
Whatever anybody is doing in the company be should be able to be explained through that model, right? And again, right, like how do we make that model, right? Like because blank canvas is the scariest thing, right?
Right.
So
Yeah.
I just thinking every company has only two activities: it is building or selling,
Right. Right.
right?
That's a beautiful
Everything,
way to put it. Yeah. Gives me something to
right?
think about. Yeah.
Everything stems from there, right?
Absolutely.
You can always map any activity that is happening in the company back to this, right?
Right. Right. Building or selling. Absolutely.
That's it, right? So like that's how I see job titles also, right? Like I just don't believe like either you are a builder or you're a seller, right? That's you have to be on the one side in the company or you're a unicorn on the both side, right? That's
Hmm.
brilliant. Right? Everything in the middle of building and selling is a communication flow problem,
Hmm.
right? Is just a how do I flow the information from what needs to be sold to what needs to be built, right? It's just that, right? So,
Right.
and that is the higher, larger mental model I carry when I try to think about management in startups, right?
Right. No, I think that's a very wonderful way of looking at it. And it's very easy. Like as a fellow entrepreneur, I think I've been doing this for a while as well. What happens is that, you get kind of stuck in the micro at times. And then there will be times when, you're making it too complicated for yourself and the way you're kind of perceiving how you want to move forward or what you want to do. But ultimately, it just falls into these two buckets. You're either building or you're selling, and at times you're doing both. But ultimately, I think as long as your actions are aligned with these two buckets, then you're doing okay.
Exactly, right? And you need to
Yeah.
just largely know how what activity I'm doing right now, how is it
Right.
contribute on the either side, so you
Right.
can decide how anxious you want to be about it, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. That's true. Like, what is perhaps, your higher priority at that moment? And then,
Exactly,
if you're just staying truthful to yourself about it.
exactly.
Because, again, this is something that I've seen with a lot of entrepreneurs, myself included, when things are moving too fast, and it's very easy to start getting busy but not being productive. And as
100%.
long as, right, as long as you're perhaps aligned with either of these buckets, then and you can be honest to yourself about it, then I think that you're on the right path.
Exactly, right? And anyways,
Yeah.
work happen in serially, right? It can be planned
Yeah.
concurrently, but happens
Yeah.
only one thing at a time, right? That's
Yeah.
always the case.
Absolutely. That's
That's
very
always,
true. You can plan anything and everything, but obviously it'll
yeah.
happen in a sequential order. So
Yeah,
that
planning
that's
is always
very true.
multiverse.
Yeah, that is true. That is true. Okay, so now coming back to Shovel, what is the next big milestone for you guys, and how do you perhaps see the company contributing positively to the to the decentralized space?
So I think this year we have spent mostly our energy into, going deep into the core of the problem, right? So I
Hmm.
think like most of our focus was on building and much less on
Hmm.
selling, right?
Hmm.
Uh, and a lot of building required us to do have a lot of partnerships and relationships with the people who are also building, right? A building never happens alone. Building happens with a peer group always, right?
Hmm.
Everything happens with a peer group, by the way, right? So finding the teams we want to work with, finding the taking some core decisions on the technology stack that we want to go around, right? So a lot of that happened this year. Uh,
Right.
Now, so another thing that we also follow is we have I frequently write a update note, right, where I like
Hmm.
to describe the whole model again, right, so that we can say "Ki we are anchoring on top of this." So on based on that, right, currently we are about to ship the version of the protocol. Right now, what we have live is a white paper, right? I
Hmm.
think white paper is enough to find peers, but white paper is not enough to take the next step as a company, right?
Hmm.
So, come in the coming few weeks, we are about to launch, like launch as in like soft launch, our
Right.
product. Like nothing big marketing and activity wise, right? We all we want to do is we want to ship out the CN right now and try start gathering market feedback, right? And also like work with different larger chain ecosystems and see how we can align our objectives together, right? So that's the immediate
Awesome.
focus for us.
Awesome, awesome. Those are, bigger goals, and those are the very foundation that you want to build the whole thing on. So, all the best to you guys on what you're doing because, again, I think what you're building is very pertinent and it adds to, the solution for adoption in Web3 in one way or another. So
Yeah.
that is something that, I feel very excited about any which way. So now let's like zoom out a little bit before we kind of wrap this up. What is your perception regarding the next bull run, and what are the kind of niches you feel would do really well in the next bull run?
Okay. So I think I think that again, right, like there are like you will always hear noise more around like stuff like Ethereum scaling through eigenlayer or MPC as a and ZKP as a technology, these things coming up,
Hmm.
right?
Right.
Like these are definitely hot for this bull run.
Right.
But I'm pretty much more interested in when do we see uh, consumer adoption of the Web3, right? I think we are pretty close on that side. It looks like technology is kind of ready, but products are lacking. Right?
Hmm.
Like so for every frontier technology, you're only asking one question, right? Is technology ready, or like productization has not happened, right? So I think
Hmm. Right.
so this is the question I was pursuing this year, right? So
Hmm.
uh, from what I understand, like I think technology is kind of ready. Like a lot of narratives around, the wallet experience is not great, or what to do, like a lot of the end user problems, right? I think like
Hmm.
this bull run next 1 or 2 years, I'm very bullish that we are going to see some breakout of some product, right? Like I'm yet to pinpoint which one, but it feels like it.
Right.
Some product will see end user adoption, and
Basically,
it will.
utility-based products, I think that something that
Yes,
can become a part of intrinsically of like the user's life on a day-to-day
yes,
basis, and that
yes,
that that would be the kind of products that will bring in adoption as well as a plethora of more people in the Web3 space. That is what I truly believe. And this is a sentiment that has been echoed, by the way, in the last few weeks by all the founders and stakeholders that I've spoken to. Everybody seems to believe that, we've kind of done infrastructure. Like a lot of people are building it, and that's great. That is obviously required, because otherwise, you cannot build anything of substance if the infrastructure is not there. But right now, if you're looking at adoption, then the only way to get adoption is to basically create an application, or have an application, or a bunch of applications that become a part of the user's day-to-day life.
Exactly, right? And those applications will not say crypto, by the way, right? Because users
exactly,
don't use product because of crypto.
Absolutely, yeah. There'll be apps like no other, like, the apps that are there in Web2, and they will be pretty similar to those applications. There'll be utility-based applications, and it wouldn't really matter that they are being, obviously that becomes like a selling point for us, and it becomes for founders, it is like the USP that it is built on decentralized technology, but the user really doesn't care. Like, I think that is, again, something that a lot of us have realized, that the end user really doesn't care about so much about, these ethos, as you said, the philosophies associated with freedom and, just decentralization. Those are not things that the user is actively day-to-day thinking about privacy, about, decentralization.
No, philosophy always need to be packaged in a product, right? It can never, like, you are anyways going to package a philosophy, right? Explicit or implicit, right? But philosophy itself is not a product.
Exactly, it cannot be a product, and the product itself has to be that, it kind of takes in all of those philosophies and creates something that is adding convenience and value to the user's life.
Absolutely. I think we are about, I am so very bullish on the space, and especially, like, these were like one of my factors of picking up DCN, right? Because I felt like most of the consumer behavior on the internet is around social and like browsing and that kind of activity, not financial activities that we see in DeFi, right? Like a zero thou option trader is a very long tail guy on the internet,
right?
So I think that's where I feel the space is, and I'm extremely excited of what happens in the next 2 years.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think, we are very aligned. And mostly, as the founders that I've talked to in the recent weeks, all of them seem to be very aligned with this thought process, which is wonderful to know. And that kind of makes me even more excited for the space in general, because when everybody is sort of thinking about the same things, great things are bound to come out. So I'm really looking forward to what the builders are going to really showcase, because we've been building for some time, and now it's, once the bull market hits, I think there'll be much more noise, and a lot more products would be uncovered that are more utilitarian in nature.
Absolutely. I think this is the cycle for it.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I've, again, like I keep saying this in almost all conversations I have, and my listeners must think, I have the same dialogue, but honestly, I really lost track of time. These conversations are usually so insightful and brilliant that I just don't remember, looking at the clock ever. So now we are out of time again. And before we wrap this up, I would love to ask you, Shobhit, one question that I like asking everybody who comes on this show. You basically, again, been on the other side, where you were building for Web2, and now, you're building for Web3, and you made that pivot. What would be your 2-3 suggestions for people who are perhaps looking to do something similar to start living on blockchain?
Okay. So I think, like, I would say, like, still the space is quite early, and you have to actually build things to really understand it. So I think reading goes so far. At some point, everybody has to take a plunge and actually, like, try to play with the software, right? Like make a toy project, right? I think reduce the stake, make a simple toy project that you see where it makes sense, right? I think that is how all great things are started, with something toy, something fun, something toy. Have fun, right? Play with the technology.
Yeah,
right? If you like it, continue. If you don't like it, don't continue, right? There will always be another time to play with it.
Right? Absolutely, so, I think. Yeah. Tinker with it. Like, get your hands dirty.
Exactly. And if you're in it, then I will just say, show up every day. That's it.
Show up every day. That is very, very important. I think, again, something that people tend to forget. Show up every day. It's the most simple, suggestions and advice that are the most tactful and that kind of really have like a huge impact and a compounding impact in your life. Showing up every day is a very good way for us to wrap this up. So, Shobhit, any parting words before we close this particular recording?
No, I think that's pretty much it. I think show up every day is quite apt.
Yeah, I think showing up every day is quite an apt way to close this. Thank you so much once again, Shobhit, for making the time to speak to us and to speak to our listeners. This was a very insightful conversation, and the way you kind of beautifully described what you guys are building. Because and I was trying to find some chinks in your armor because this is, as you said, this is an engineering-facing product that you're creating. But because these are listeners who are dialing in, and I wanted them to resonate with what you're building. That's why I kept like going after the mission and the messaging. But I think you did a wonderful job, and I'm very, very grateful you could make the time.
Thank you, Tarusha. I enjoyed talking to you.